Buenos dias. Hello, hello, everyone. It's Dr. Zayda, and in this video, we are going to be talking about conceptualization and operationalization. Guess what? If you are conducting social science research, you will need to know what it means to conceptualize and operationalize. So let's get this party started. The goal of today's presentation is to understand what is meant by operationalization and conceptualization. I also want to share why this is important in social science research. What is conceptualization? Conceptualization simply means to define a variable. What is a variable? A variable is simply something that varies. Conceptualization is especially important when your research involves concepts. What is a concept? A concept, um, before we delve into that, I want to just share that some variables are observable. For example, you can see a chair, a building, a table. These are called observable variables, while other variables are unobservable, such as faith, gaslighting, wellness, and creativity. These are things that are abstract, that we cannot touch. It exists in our social reality, but these are not things that are tangible. A concept refers to an unobservable or abstract variable. For example, I have these three words. I want you to tell me, are these observable or are these unobservable? You have a zebra, an alligator, and a jellyfish. The answer is that they are observable. You can see an alligator, you can see a zebra, you can see a jellyfish. These are all things that are called observable variables. Okay. Here are some examples of unobservable variables, or AKA concepts in social sciences, in social science. Politics, protest, religiosity, liberal, conservative, immigrant, poor, freedom, homeless. Why is it important to define our variables? Because this will help you with data analysis. Because you have defined your concept when you're analyzing your data, you know exactly what you're looking for because you've already defined what you're looking at, what your variable is. It's also important to know that some definitions vary across individuals, communities, and societies. Readers and the target population need to know what you're talking about. So that's why it's important to conceptualize. That is why we conceptualize in social science. I like to use the example of Sonesaburo Makiguchi. Makiguchi was an advocate during World War II. He was against militarism and nationalism in Japan, and he was arrested because of thought crimes or questioning the educational system in Japan. During that era, it was extremely militarized. So he was imprisoned for several years. And one day the government offered him his freedom. He said no, because he was already free. According to Makiguchi, he had undergone a spiritual confirmation of what is called stage of non-regression in Buddhism. In his spiritual development, he felt that he was already free. In this stage of non-regression, you begin to see the world upside down. So, in this view, he felt that freedom was something that was from within. It was not something that could be given to you. Because if something can be given to you, it subsequently follows that it can also be taken away. So this person, Makiguchi, who by the way is also the founder of the Soka Gakkai, a sect of the Buddhist religion, uh, felt that he had already reached freedom, so he decided to stay in prison. I like to use this example because the takeaway is that for him, what freedom means to him may significantly deviated from what the Japanese government understood freedom to be. You can probably think of several examples where you may have a particular concept, and this concept has societal agreement, scientific agreement, but to a particular person or population, that concept means something completely different. And it's really important to have this in mind when you're a researcher, when you're defining your concepts. Essentially, they should not be based upon your personal opinion. Even when you go to the scientific literature and define your concepts, it's important to know that your concepts may differ depending on what population you are studying. It's important to be mindful of this, and that then allows us to be better scientific researchers. All right, let's move on to a conceptualization exercise. I want you all to grab a paper and a pencil, and if you want, you can pause the video and define the term faith in one sentence. Not two sentences, not five sentences, not an essay, just one sentence. So go ahead, pause the video, and define the term faith. Okay. Congratulations. You just conceptualize the concept of faith. Here are some possible definitions. Faith is the belief in someone or something void of empirical evidence. Faith is the belief in a divine source. Faith refers to having hope in someone or something. All right. Now that we've discussed what it means to conceptualize, I want to move on to discuss what is a dimension. If you're learning how to conceptualize, you need to know what it means. You need to know what dimensions are. So a dimension simply refers to aspects or facets of a concept. When your study involves concepts, it's important to specify what these dimensions are. It's probable that your concept could be multidimensional. It could also be unidimensional, meaning that it does not have many dimensions, it just has one dimension. If you're trying to figure out, well, what are the dimensions of this concept, one way to do this is by referring to the scientific literature. It may have information about how scientists have how they define the concept. There could also be empirical evidence that supports the concept having multiple dimensions. Okay, here is an example. The concept wellness has several facets. Wellness can refer to spiritual wellness, physical wellness, family wellness, emotional wellness, social wellness, environmental wellness, and so forth. So if you're conducting a study on wellness, you need to specify, are you just looking at physical wellness, or are you looking at all of the dimensions of wellness? Here's another example of a concept, citizenship. Citizenship to the layperson may simply refer to having a passport that pertains to a particular country or having legal status. But in the scientific literature, citizenship extends beyond legal status, and there are other dimensions of citizenship other than the legal dimension. For example, citizenship also refers to rights and culture. So rights can be social rights, for example, or political rights. And culture, the culture dimension of citizenship can refer to, for example, the degree to which a social group is accepted in the polity. or their representations in the media. I want to now move on to operationalization. This is when we assign measurable indicators or examples to a concept. Therefore, operationalization also allows for measuring a concept. So when you're doing social science research, it's very important to not only conceptualize your term or AKA define your term, but to also operationalize your concept. The way we operationalize a concept should be based on the scientific literature, not our personal opinion. In other words, to operationalize a concept, you would need to refer to the scientific literature. Here is an example. Let's operationalize the concept of faith. One might say that faith can be operationalized as, for example, the belief in the divine source, the belief in God or goddess, having a great sense of hope, the belief that everything will be okay when facing adversity. These are all called indicators of the concept. And what this does is that this allows us to measure the concept faith. So let's say I want to do a survey and I want to measure the degree to which particular population has faith. I may ask them a series of questions, and each of the questions will represent a different indicator of faith. I might ask them, to what degree do you believe in the divine on the scale 0 to 10, with 0 representing X, Y, and Z, and 10 representing X, Y, A, B, C. I might ask them, to what degree do you believe in God? I could also just say, do you believe in God? Do you believe in the divine? Yes, no, yes, no. So there's different ways to measure. I will not talk about that deeply in this video, but I do want to underscore that by operationalizing a concept, we also create the opportunity to measure the concept if we are doing a survey or a scale. I want to now go to the next video, the next slide, and we're going to now operationalize religiosity. This concept can be operationalized as, for example, self-identification with a religion, reading a religious text, attending church or faith service. So again, these 3 examples represent indicators of religiosity. So if we want to measure the degree to which a population is exhibiting religiosity, we may ask them, do you identify with a religion? Do you read a religious text? Do you attend church service or faith service? By answering yes to these questions, they can receive a score of 1. And right there, what we've done is that we are now measuring it, right? So the more that they respond yes, the more indicators of religiosity they exhibit. Lower scores of religiosity indicate lower scores of religiosity, and higher scores reflect higher scores of religiosity. Okay, so what we just did there in this example I just gave is we've measured it in a group of individuals. Okay, let's move on to example number 3, citizenry exclusion. Let us operationalize this concept. This concept can be operationalized as denying service to a person due to their legal status, nationality, race, ethnicity, religion, or other elements of their citizenry background. It can also include enacting physical violence due to these different dimensions of citizenry. It can also include enacting hate speech among individuals due to their citizenry background, due to their legal status, nationality, race, ethnicity, and so forth. So these are all indicators of the concept citizenry exclusion. Now, in the two other examples I gave, it dealt with how to measure it, and that's awesome if we're doing a survey. But let's say you're working with qualitative data. Let's say you're doing interviews and you want to unearth the ways that citizenry exclusion manifests in the data. It's still important to operationalize citizenry exclusion because when we're looking at, for example, our interview data, we will come across several examples. And we need to make sure that the examples that we unearth in the data and that we analyze match what we've defined citizenry exclusion as. So if I have an example that alludes to a respondent talking about how they got denied of a service or they experienced physical violence or someone enacted hate speech because of their race, ethnicity, uh, religion, or other element of citizenry background, then that statement or those statements will qualify as empirical evidence related to the empirical relationship under examination. Now, I know that was a mouthful, so let me just reframe what I just said. Essentially, when you're working with qualitative data, it's important that um the what we're quote unquote analyzing actually matches what we're looking at. So if I'm doing a study on this concept, citizenry exclusion, and a person provides an example of discrimination or exclusion, but this discrimination or exclusion is not based on citizenry, their citizenry background. Let's say it's based on something else, then that something else does not qualify. Um, I'm not going to analyze it. It's not going to be a part of the analytics of the study because I've already defined how I've already identified how I conceptualize citizenry exclusion, and I'm only looking at evidence of citizenry exclusion based upon how I've conceptualized citizenry exclusion. And that's really why we conceptualize in the first place, because once we start getting to that data, especially when you're working in qualitative data, it's so rich and you got all of this information in front of you, and you need to have a framework for analyzing that data. And conceptualizing allows you to do that. All right. So you're probably wondering now, okay, so I have this information. How can I apply this to my study? Essentially, what you want to do when you're writing a scientific paper is that once you state your research question, which typically is in the introduction, you want to follow that up with a definition, especially if you're working with concepts. So you'll say something like, this is my research question, followed by, this is how I'm conceptualizing this term. You can also, after that, provide examples of indicators. And what that does is that it helps to situate the paper. We don't want to wait until the end of the paper, reading the discussion, that we then know how you're defining your terms. You want to make sure you're putting that up front in the introduction, how you are defining your terms. Here is an example. This study examines the following research question. How do foster and adoption agencies contribute to citizenry exclusion? Citizenry exclusion is defined as exclusion based on citizenry or indicators such as legal status, race, ethnicity, nationality, country of origin, culture, and language. Indicators of citizenry exclusion include physical violence, enacting hate speech, and denying service based on citizenry background. So what I've done there is that I defined this concept, I stated the research question, followed up by the conceptualization of the term. I also identified the dimensions of this concept, and I provided examples of indicators. Okay. To conclude, I'd like to invite you all to do some application. Write down your research question and ask yourself, does your study involve concepts? If yes, what aspects or dimensions of the concept are you investigating? Conceptualize and operationalize the concepts of interest. All right, that is the end of the video. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope this video helped to augment understandings of what it means to conceptualize and operationalize. For more resources, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and for research advising support, you can send me an email. Have a lovely day.